This is Eric Mwatha with Mwatha.com with yet another educational video. Today I'm going to be looking at a question that was posed to me, and so I'm going to respond to your question via video because it's easy for me to explain what I could have typed in an email. And so anyway, let's take a look at the two stocks that you did ask about. First one here is ALKS and the other one is AMBA, and you're trying to find out if the stocks are good candidates on a breakout level. One thing I have to note here is you did give me some details just for the sake of me understanding what you are looking at, and you mentioned that the RSI last 6 months is at that level, and I believe that's the daily. Nothing wrong with that, looking at the daily. But remember, when we're looking for breakouts, our main emphasis is on the monthly first and foremost. So that's one thing I wanted to add. So the monthly view should be more important, and we look at 3-year monthly view. Now, unless you are trying to trade this on a day-to-day basis, maybe for a week or two, maybe you can spend more time looking at the daily. But if you really want to have a good swing trade for a couple of weeks, couple of months, then the monthly is your best time frame, and I'll explain that in a second. So here's your question, here's your email. I'm going to respond to it right now, and let's go to the chart, see what we have in terms of timing, because the issue that I see here is really a question of timing. And so let's go and take a look at that. Okay, so we take a look at the first stock, ALKS. You ask whether it's a timely buy. I say yes, and I say no. It is not a timely buy in my opinion, because the ideal entry point was when it broke out above this previous weekly closing high. So your entry point most recently was here, a couple of points before that, and so the price level there to have watched on the weekly was 58.88, which is this weekly closing high. Now, if you want, you can chase the stock even at current levels, and that's up to you, but I don't think it's where you want to. There's so many options in the market for candidates. Why would you want to chase an extended stock? The other key here to note is generally you want to buy the stock within 5%, so 0% to 1% after it has broken out. So your window of opportunity to go long on a breakout is somewhere 5% within that entry level. And I think as of right now, this is slightly above. You can wait for it to come back closer to this 5% buying zone. 5% is just a rough number. You can buy it even at 10%, 20%, 30% above the buy point. But just for the sake of timing, it's a good idea to try and buy it within 5% as a general rule, but you don't have to follow that, not necessarily, because as an example, if the stock is going to trade at $200 in the next coming months and years, what difference does it make if you buy at 63 or 66? You see what I'm saying? But because you don't know what the future holds, it's good to keep it as close to the ideal buy point as possible, so you can have as much of a milk the gain as much as possible, or the move. We also see here that the chart does look good, honestly, because RSI is moving back above 69.1. We're also breaking out from the highs there, so the breakout looks good. I have no problems with your technical analysis. I have no problem, nothing to say about the choice of stock. The choice of stock is perfect. The only thing here is the timing aspect. If you go to the monthly, you'll see a slight issue here. On the monthly, the timing needs to have been during this monthly breakout. If you bought the stock on a monthly chart, the entry level was way lower, and that would have given you an entry point of 50.33, which was this previous monthly closing high. So your entry level was here, and that makes sense because the RSI moved back above 69.10. We'll also see that the MACDs were also trading above 0 and already close, if not at 3-year highs. So the minimum requirement was met at that time, So from a timing perspective, I'll say this one is a little bit extended, just because it is extended from its weekly, extended from its monthly, especially the monthly. But if you want to own it, then you can go back to the daily time frame. So let's go to the daily, see what the daily gives us. And you can see the daily here is showing some pullback. So you can wait to see whether you can get a nice entry closer to 58 points. So the entry level on a weekly we had shown earlier was 58.88, which probably happens to be also this daily closing high. So you can wait for a pullback somewhere in this general territory to see whether it holds, and that could be where you want to go long after a pullback. You can also go to the hourly to see whether you can get a nice entry. Now for the purpose of timing, you can use this entry. So there was a movement above this RSI on the hourly, I'm trying to say, on the hourly. This move here began this short-term hour-to-hour move higher. We know that that's a fact. Now if we draw a straight line like that, if the stock comes back to this general territory and shows uniform activity like it did here, that is where you want to go long. So from a timing perspective, because the stock is already extended, you would rather the RSI come back to test this ideal entry point on a short-term basis. If it shows strength and starts moving higher, then you can use that as an entry level. If you want to drill it down even further, you can go to the 5-minute chart. And on the 5-minute chart, you can see that there was a nice low here. Ever since these 5-minute lows, the stock has gone on to trade high over the next couple of days. So we find out where the entry point was here. So we can find out where this began on an ideal basis. On hindsight, it began when the RSI moved above this level here. Draw a simple straight line. And on a 5-minute chart, you can use every time this RSI comes back and finds support on this line with uniform activity like it did at this instant. That was a perfect lows on the 5-minute chart. It touched this with uniform activity back above the green line. It was nice entry there, and now it's doing the same thing here. So from a 5-minute perspective, this could be where you want to go long, especially if it shows another movement confirming that this is indeed support territory. So you can use the 5-minute chart, the hourly chart to narrow down on your entry if you've already missed a move. Okay, let's take a look at the other stock, which is also a great pick. I mean, you're doing fantastic work, I have to say. Here the stock is breaking out above that level there. So I would say you can use the weekly, but I think the clearest view on this one is the monthly. And you can see from the monthly that this is your most recent monthly closing high. Price there is at 55. So that's your entry. So the stock is within the 5% window. Whoops. Yeah, try writing with a mouse. It's not easy. Anyway, so the stock is within the 5% window. Why? That doesn't look right. 5. All right. So the stock was within the 5% window. Well, I guess you don't do that. I guess you go like that. Less than 5%. Okay. Less or equal to 5%. So the 5% window would be somewhere here for an entry. And if it can stay above that and hold above that, this is an ideal buy. You can see that the RSI is above 69.1. Could also have an opportunity of moving to all-time highs. If that happens, if the RSI moves to all-time highs when the stock is this extended, expect the stock to blast even higher. We take a look at the MACDs, and the MACDs do also indeed give us this breakout to 3-year highs, to all-time highs. So this one, from a timing perspective, in my opinion, is a better candidate as it moves above the prior monthly closing high. And of course, we have our minimum 1 month of rest there. 1 month of rest because it is below the previous monthly closing high, and here doing its best to break out. Let's just take a look at the daily for the sake of analysis. We don't have to look at the daily, but for the sake of this educational video, it's okay. Now, one thing I do note here is the stock has come back to a prior resistance area and seems to be stalling. So here at about 60, there's a problem. It needs to be eventually above that if it's gonna do well. Also happens to be a line which I haven't drawn until now. I'm just seeing this for the first time, but it looks like if you connect the highs, the stock is connecting the RSI high. So this could be an area where the stock struggles. If you go back to that monthly chart, you can see the monthly is very powerful. So I say, even though the daily is not very convincing, if the stock continues holding above $55, you can still own the stock with a stop underneath, either 5% stop, or if it moves back below 55. If you take a look at so the daily is not very inspiring, but take a look at the hourly. And on the hourly, we also see something similar to the daily, in that it is seemingly showing resistance at 69.1. And let me show you that. Resistance at 69.1 has been reason for stock hitting short-term highs. And even here, rejection with uniform activity at 69.1. So it's really questionable whether it's going to do well. It shows resistance at around 60. Take a look at the 5-minute window, and we're just trying to see where we can, and we see that there was a slight breakout here. You can draw it either from this and draw a straight line there. If it comes there and shows uniform activity, then this is where you want to go long on a 5-minute window. But you can also draw it, remember there's no hard science here, you can also take the prior highs, something like that, which is around 50, or take this low here. You can draw it that way, because this movement from these lows on the RSI corresponds with this perfect entry on hindsight before the stock had a move from 50 to 60. That's a big move, almost a 20% gain. All right, and draw a straight line, and you can see that as of right now it seems to be holding that. So somewhere around here at 58 is a short-term entry if you're inclined to own the stock or are desperate to own the stock. So that's one way I would look at it, that if it can bounce above the prior entry level, which is somewhere like there, if it can move above that line with uniform activity, which is potentially what it's trying to do, then this is where you'd go long, somewhere here at 58. So yes, also it's always a good thing to consider the MACDs on a short-term basis. You'd like both MACDs to be above 0, indicating momentum is to the upside. So you'd like also confirmation that A, the RSI is holding that line, and B, that the MACDs have moved back above 0 on a short-term basis, because you want momentum to be pushing your stock higher the moment and the instant you go along. Eric Mwade, good luck, peace, and blessings. Woo!